The Democrats working overtime to politicize the pandemic and blame the president for all of it. So how will this end up shaping the critical election? Let's ask White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. Good evening.
Good evening, Judge. So here's,
all right,
here's
it's good
what
to have you back on. Now,
go ahead.
You're going to hit it already. Even before I ask you a question, you know what?
Set it
You're
up
the
there
best.
beautifully.
Look. Yes, Joe Biden blames everything on Donald Trump and says that the pandemic is going to be the undoing of President Trump. What say you?
So what I say is, first of all, Joe Biden's riding a mule into a box canyon, and here's why. I think there'll be three issues in this campaign. Channeling John Kennedy, the senator, right? I think there'll be three issues in the campaign. First, there'll be jobs, the economy, but the problem Biden has is we've got the greatest jobs president and trade negotiator in history, so he gets pummeled on that. We got like 10 Democratic mayors, 10 tokes over the thin blue line, so President Trump's going to win on law and order. So what the Biden crew is doing is making this really big bet on blaming the pandemic on the president. Now, here's the problem. I'll give you some statistics on this. Rasmussen poll comes out late July. What it says is that fully half of America blames China for the virus. And this is even more interesting. 53% of Americans now want China to pay reparations for all of the costs they're imposing on this country. And that's up from 43% in March. And that number is just going to keep rising. And that's what Joe Biden has to face. And as an economist, Judge, let me tell you what the back of the envelope calculation looks if we start assessing China with the cost of the pandemic they have infected this country with and killed over 200,000 Americans with. If you look at the $10 trillion of stimulus alone, that's 10.
Right.
If you look at the loss in the gross domestic product so far, that's going to be on a $20 trillion GDP. We're looking at another $4 trillion. Perversely, the government values a life at $10 million. A life is priceless, but at $10 million and soon to be 200,000 Americans dead, that's another $2 trillion. You add up all the pain and suffering and damages as a lawyer, we're going to lose the equivalent of an entire year's of GDP, $20 trillion, because the Chinese Communist Party
what do we do
lied
about
about the virus. Well, that's just why this is going to be such an important issue. The president has already raised this issue with the American people. Biden is in that box canyon because if he tries to raise that issue, he has to acknowledge that China, the Chinese Communist Party, caused the pandemic, not President Trump. But if he doesn't raise the issue, then he has to contend with American people who are mad as hell at the Chinese Communist Party. I'm telling you, if that's 53% now of Americans who want reparations from the Chinese, by the time Labor Day rolls around, it's going to be up to 60%. By the time Election Day rolls around, it's going to be about 95%. The only people who are not going to be for that would be Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. So the other issue, Judge, in terms of Joe Biden kind of ignoring China's pummeling of our economy on the one hand and then trying to blame the president for the virus, is that there's really some important questions the American people have to understand, both about the origins of the virus and how China is using the virus to advance its political and strategic agenda. If you look at what they're doing behind the veil of the virus, they've cut a deal with the Philippines to take over the South China Sea. They squashed Hong Kong behind the chaos of the virus. They invaded India.
Right.
It speaks to the fact that maybe they intended all along to spread this virus around the world. But there's a question, and that leads us to the questions about the virus. We know now that there's a high likelihood that it came from one of two virology labs in Wuhan, but we don't know. Was it genetically engineered through this thing called gain of function? Is it a weaponized virus? I can tell you, if nature weaponized
Peter,
this thing, yeah.
Irrespective, I'm going to interrupt you now, but irrespective, they lied about it, okay? And they blocked, Wuhan from going into the rest of China and then let it all out to the rest of the world. Anyway, Peter Navarro, you know what? I didn't ask you one question other than the first one, and that's because you're just letting you go. But it's always great having you on, Justice. Thank you so much.
Silence is acceptance, and Biden has been silent, and he's accepted China doing this to the American people. It's a box canyon. He's on a mule, and he's doomed.
Okay, well, thank you for that visual, Peter Navarro.